Hello, my name is Eva and I run the account Notation is Great on Twitter. So this is the second of two videos where I speak about anomalies of musical notation. So what are these anomalies? Well, basically the idea here is that once you get to the 17th and especially the 18th century, most scores, both manuscript and printed, are quite legible for us. So we are able to recognize, identify most of what we see there. But still, there are a few particularities that we might struggle with. So these two videos are dedicated to explaining some of those particularities. For this video, I decided to go with the theme of 18th century instrumental music. So as you might know, the 18th century was very important for the development of instrumental music, with new literature being written for the harpsichord, the violin, the cello, and so on. And also different countries had their own different traditions. And this example here comes from France, which, as you might know, was a center of violin music and of orchestral music as well, especially in the royal entourage. And this is the entourage this example comes from. So, Michel Richard de Lalande's Symphonie pour le souper du roi, the symphonies for the king's dinner. So, if we have a look at this, we might recognize most of what we see on the page, but there are a couple of things that maybe don't really add up for us. So for example, if you look at that first bar, if you look at the upper beat, so we're in 2-2 here, you will see that we have a B flat in the bass and a B natural in the upper voice. So this doesn't sound right. It's not right, okay? So if you look at the clef, you'll see that in the upper voice, it's a G clef, we can recognize that, but it's not on the second line, which is what we normally find. It's on the first line, on the bottom line. So the G is there on the bottom line. So that note that we thought might be a B natural, it's really a D. So now it starts to make more sense. So this type of clef is very common in French music of the time, and it's normally known as the violin clef. And you might have noticed that really the pitch of the notes is the same as in the bass clef, so the F clef on the fourth line. So the pitches are the same, but with the violin clef, they are read 2 octaves higher than in the bass clef. Another example, this time from Carlo Tesarini's Violin Sonatas. So this time we're looking at the key signature. So those X signs that you can see there are really sharps, okay? So instead of the hashtag type symbol, they used an X or a cross. And you can also see that they are stacked on top of each other, okay? So now we tend to separate different sharps or flats, but at this time it was very common that it could be aligned vertically. So the next example comes from one of the harpsichord sonatas by Annabonne, so an 18th century composer who wrote a lot for the harpsichord. And again, this all looks quite familiar to us, except for perhaps this bar here, and there are similar examples later on. So here we have a quaver rest followed by 7 128th notes, so semi, hemi, demi, semi-quavers, which with 5 flags instead of 4. So this doesn't sound very logical, because how can you fit 7 of those in the space of a quaver? Well, basically at this time it was common for this kind of tuplets or irregular groupings of notes to be notated as such, so without any specific indication that they were in fact an irregular grouping. So you would just have to fit those 7 somehow into the space of a quaver. So here we get to my favorite example. So this is by Elisabeth Jacquet de la Guerre, who was a French composer from the 18th century who wrote a lot for the harpsichord. So this is from her harpsichord books. And as you can see here, there's no indication of time signature, and note values seem to be all over the place. Well, this is a classical example of a prelude non mesuré or unmeasured prelude. And this was a really important feature in harpsichord music of the 18th century, so particularly in French music. And there are other examples in other earlier repertoires, but it really flourished in this context. So basically, this complete lack of time signatures or tempo indications means that the tempo is meant to be taken quite freely by the performer. You don't need to be so limited by exact equivalences between note values. You have a few ligatures and other signs which are meant to give you some indication as to the shape or the phrasing of the prelude. So I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, I would like to invite you to consider making a donation to a charity which supports musicians during this COVID-19 crisis. So you have a couple of examples below, but there may be others in your own country, so please consider doing that. And if you have any other examples of any other notational anomalies that you can think of in the 18th century, 17th century, please let me know here or on Twitter. So other than that, many thanks for watching this video. Goodbye.